And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog on this beautiful Friday morning. Yes, reminder, it is Friday for all you working stiffs. And I'm Andy Kennedy, and it is a very exciting day today for us here at Hair of the Dog. And the reason I say that is because my lovely and talented co-host got a brand new camera, and she no longer looks like Max Headroom's sister. So she in for an absolutely special treat today, right? And you'll finally get to see what she looks like. Good morning, Carrie Barber.
Good morning, Andy. What a lovely introduction. And yeah, I have to thank our generous patron donors for this. This is my new camera. So thank you so much. Every dollar is spent extraordinarily miserly. So it took a while, but yeah, this is the new camera. So thank you. I actually am not a vampire. I am human. So yay.
Yes. You can see your own reflection. It's all good, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that, and I'm out in the daytime. So unless I'm a sparkly vampire, it's
So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still snowing in New Mexico?
No, it turned into rain, and now we're gonna have a sunny day, and 55 degrees is the temperature today. So this is winter in the high desert, and I'm here for it. It's nice.
You just got the occasional white stuff falling from the sky to remind you of your roots, right?
Exactly. So yeah, talking to folks back in Illinois, I'm like, I kind of feel a little guilty because they're dealing with Arctic temperatures and snow and ice and back and forth, and none of that.
So I did a quick scan of the forecast. You know, I'm old enough to do that. And I did a quick scan and calculation, and starting tomorrow, where I live, the next 6 days, the high temperature in those 6 days will be, during the day, will be 15 degrees.
Oh, that sucks. I'm sorry.
A high.
Yeah, no, we
And
wake up.
that's goofy numbers. That's not Celsius. That's Fahrenheit.
Wow. Yeah, that's what I wake up to, is like about 18, and then it quickly goes up to 50. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting. My wife and I lately have been jumping on the new TV series, that have become available, or people are discovering because they're, bored to fuck, because for the most part, you have to stay in your house, especially here in Ontario. And so we watched, and I've never really been a TV person forever, right? I've always just watched sports. And so, we've decided that, okay, well, as time together, we're going to be doing, some TV shows and seeing ones that, that we can watch together that are interesting. We both got a real kick out of Ozark. That was quite funny, right? That was very well done series. That was quite good. It was recommended that there was one show with Hilary Swank called Away, and it's about a mission to Mars, right? The first human spaceship to Mars. But I kind of didn't want, I thought that it was misnamed, that it shouldn't be called Away. It should be called Emotions in Space.
Was it a Lifetime TV show?
Oh, there was a female astronaut crying every 5 minutes. I frickin' swear, it was annoying as fuck.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So I am so bad. I don't even know any of the programs that you're talking about. I am just.
Well, it's just a diversion, right? And it's a
Right.
way that, because Nurse Deb works every day, and I work from home with my editing and my graphics design stuff, and so, it's like we're both working, but she comes home, and so we've decided that for our own sanity's sake that we would spend around the dinner hour and an hour or two afterwards, and just get into some TV shows and that kind of thing. It's just as a way to kind of stay grounded while things are going crazy. So it works for us.
Well, it's the self-care. Absolutely. And I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and that was something that I needed to be more mindful of, because like yesterday I was in a horrific mood, and it because on social media we make snap judgments about people based on what their photo looks like or their comments that they make, and you're gonna get it wrong always. And I kept seeing that over and over again, and I got so frustrated because I think that, well, it's the phrase, and this is so true, hurt people tend to hurt other people. And I have never seen a larger group than Americans who are so broken, not just because of what has happened to us in our personal experience with racism and all of these other things, but even now with the economics and just how we push people to extremes, right? So conversations about racism that isolate and diminish white people, well, that's a really good way to radicalize a white person and turn them into a Proud Boy if we're not careful. So this whole idea that we take care of each other, and we can't do that unless we're able to step back. So I personally had to step away and get out of the discussions and arguments and just go kind of, I hate to sound new agey, but center myself a little bit so that I am not further contributing to negativity, because I don't know what somebody's going through right now. And if my words come off harshly, now I own that. And whatever mistake that person makes because of my harshness, now I own that too. So today, I just want to remind people before we get started with bullshit headlines, every day is a new opportunity, and you get to make a choice. It can either continue with you or it ends with you, and you can look around you and end some of the tribalism, end some of this where, I don't trust this person because they look different from me. Recognize that and maybe make some different choices. But real quick, for those of you who are just tuning in on this lovely Friday, we are interactive. So anything that you type in the chat, particularly on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, any one of our channels that we stream on, we're going to see that. So I want to give a quick shout out to Mike. Mike is so happy I no longer look like a potato. Thank you, Mike.
Wow, he really knows how to sweet talk the women, doesn't he?
He sure does.
Wow,
Thanks, Mike.
You really don't look like a potato.
Right. I was gonna go with glittery vampire, but okay, potato. We'll do that. So on that front, in other news about potatoes, this was kind of interesting. So
what a segue.
Yes. Yes. So okay, so one of the headlines that came out of this, and this one was kind of telling here. So in Dallas, the Texas Tribune is reporting that in Dallas, city officials had prioritized vaccines to the marginalized communities. So if you recall, we called it here in February of last year that poor, underserved social justice communities, these are the communities where we put all of our coal ash and toxic waste and all of these things in the poorer communities, they were going to get hit harder with the coronavirus and all of the effects of it than anyone else. And that proved to be true, unfortunately. So what Dallas was trying to do was prioritize those communities for vaccines first. And Texas state officials decided to intervene and said, if you do that, we're going to cut the number of vaccines you have. So state of Texas said, fuck you to these communities. And so now Dallas is going to have to rework their plan. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, Texas, but you're showing your true colors here. Who you vote for is important. And then along those lines with Texas, also out of Texas, Ted Cruz is making news this morning. He did a bullshit thing. And I am totally pinning this on Ted Cruz. I don't have the facts to back it up, but here's why. Ted Cruz was the loudest one. He was the one in this particular scenario who the lady does protest too much is what I was looking at. So here's what happened. You had all of the National Guards stationed around the Capitol, and sometime last night, the Capitol Police ordered them out, immediately out. Get your shit, get out. So you had thousands of National Guard troops relegated to a parking garage, and you could see them laying down whatever, this sort of thing. So anybody who's been in the military, National Guard or whatever, when you see a picture of a bunch of guards persons, service members laying down, it's not necessarily that they have to sleep there. It's the old adage, if you're on hold, I forget exactly how it goes, but if you're standing around, you can sit. If you can sit, you can lay down. If you can lay down, sleep. And that's kind of how the waiting period works when you're in the service of your country. So that was them laying down. Well, so Ted Cruz, rather than calling the Capitol Police, he's got the phone number, he's got staff, he went immediately to Twitter and tried to blame Democrats. So there's your first clue, the first one who called it out is probably the one who actually did it. So I'm recommending that people check Ted's phone records right this morning, because what the response to it was Tammy Duckworth out of Illinois got on the phone to the Capitol Police and their leadership, said, what the hell, bring them back in right now. And by midnight, she got them all back into the indoor facilities of the Capitol complex. So it was a really easy fix. Just pick up the phone and make it happen. Ted Cruz chose to go to Twitter, and so this is all part of this behaving badly that is happening right now. And a lot of these seditionist Congress members, including Josh Hawley, are rebelling against some of the things that Biden has done already. Like, for example, they have to sign some sort of ethics pledge. Well, Hawley decided, no, I'm against ethics or whatever. So they're pushing back. And Hawley himself is pushing back on what he says is an unconstitutional push for impeachment. I would invite Hawley to read the Constitution, because this is the same gentleman who didn't know what free speech in the First Amendment was. That was last week. So Missouri, stop sending ignorant people, please, because you affect all of us.
Really has his eye on the prize, doesn't he?
Oh, he's another Ted Cruz. He's a younger, prettier Ted Cruz.
I'd go even further and think that he wants to be the new Trump for 2024. That he wants,
absolutely.
He's following the template to the T, right?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I agree.
Yes. But why let ethics and morality get in the way?
There's that. And then let's be clear, this ethics pledge is just a pledge. It's not a contract or anything like that. And it doesn't appear to have any teeth to it, but he's still not going to sign it, right? But you remember years ago where they were signing the I won't raise taxes pledge from some pundit, right? They were lining up to sign that one. Which kind of led to a piece of legislation that we'll get into here in a little bit. But what was that guy's name? He was a weird looking fucker too. Hey, good morning, Mike Patino. How are you? Thank you for joining us this morning. So so that's happening. One other real quick note that I want to get in here, because I know that we've been talking about free speech and Trump and Twitter, something interesting happened because the Chinese embassy in DC was tweeting out a couple tweets about the Uyghurs and justifying their treatment of the Uyghurs, and Twitter suspended their account temporarily. So it adds complexity to the free speech and private company platform. So if you're going to defend Trump, now you have to defend China too. So it's a really interesting dynamic here. But the answer to this, in my mind, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is make it a public utility. And then we can end this conversation about the relationship of free speech and private corporations, right? Because
I just got a chilling thought.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what if now that Trump is no longer president, Twitter has hired him as a fact checker?
It's like hiring the hacker to work for the oh,
let's see, China fake news.
Yeah, well, no, he still has business dealings there, so I imagine he would be a little more kind to anything they had to say. And let's not forget that he himself is not a fan of Muslims, so he'd be totally on board with genocide there. So yeah, so those are the big headlines that are unfortunately making the news now. So the two things that I wanted to get to, and I was looking for this, these were the things that were kind of on my radar over the last week. Number one is McConnell is still fighting for the filibuster, and that is huge. So Chuck Schumer, he and McConnell are going back and forth. And the reason why this is important is because you have a 50-50 split in the Senate, and then you'll have Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote. You never really want to go to that extreme. You want to have the votes in excess of that. If the filibuster still exists, then you have to go to a supermajority, not the simple majority, the supermajority, and that makes it much harder, especially why I don't understand why we have seditionists still sitting in Congress. Why are they still there? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? So, but they are. And while they are, if you give McConnell the filibuster, as he's calling it, the minority rights, okay, this is a guy that under the Obama administration, the first 2 years of the Obama administration, broke the record. I mean, pole vaulted right over it for use of filibuster. It was like 328 times. And what this looks like is, hey, we want to bring this bill to the floor and we're going to read it, and it's about saving puppies. And just one person can go, I object. Conversation stops, everything stops, no debate, no vote, no nothing. It's done. So that's what he's asking for. So this whole idea that, well, yeah, we have, Team Blue on the House and the Senate and Kamala is a tiebreaker. That's not how it works. So if he gets the filibuster and that remains as part of the rules in the Senate, nothing's going to happen. And that's exactly what he's asking for. So now the Democrats, Chuck Schumer and everyone else, has to weigh, and they do this every time. If we get rid of this rule for them, and then during the next election, when we get swept out, not if, but when, then we no longer have those rules, and we are gonna, well, you know what, you haven't put up an opposition to Republican legislation so far, so yeah, so that was one of the big ones that I'm looking for, and that is still not resolved. They're still arguing over the filibuster. The other one there was this piece of legislation that was introduced in the Senate that corporate media said was going to be a workaround for Citizens United, that it allowed for transparency and that corporations were going to have additional scrutiny about who they gave donations to. So I went out and looked. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. The only bill that I found was actually a House bill that has now gone to the Senate. So if this bill exists in Congress is introduced into the Senate that does something for corporate donations to politicians, okay, maybe. There was a Senate bill that was introduced for transparency in elections. This was in response to the whole idea that the elections were fraudulent. So maybe it's buried in there somewhere in one line. I didn't see it. If you found it, post it in the chat. I'll go take a look at it, that sort of thing. But the one that I want to look at today is HR 22. This one was introduced in the House, passed the House, now it's going to the Senate. So this is a Congressional Budget Justification Transparency Act of 2021. Mike Quigley out of Illinois. So Andy, you want to put up that graphic that no one's going to be able to see anyway?
It's up.
Okay, awesome.
And nobody's reading it.
Awesome. That's perfect. So what this bill actually does, and I posted a link in the links for today, so you can go and read this thing. This is so funny because this one has the text on congress.gov, but some more contentious bills, and I was talking to Mike yesterday, contentious bills about firearm ownership. Those don't have the text populated in them. It's supposed to be within 3 days after a bill is submitted either to the House or Senate. The text of that bill is supposed to be publicly available. And I've commented on this before, particularly over the last 4 years, that wasn't happening. So we didn't have the transparency that we were supposed to have. But this particular bill, HR 22, does have the text in it. So you can read it, and I did read it. So what it basically does is if you're a government contractor, like we saw during the CARES Act and all these other things, there was this obfuscation of where the money was going. It was really hard to figure out who was getting the money, what they were doing with it, and that sort of thing. So this is kind of a revision on that and adds a layer of extra transparency that we didn't have over the last few years. And there's a publicly available website where you can actually go. You now have to sign up for an account. But this is the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency. It's a mouthful. Hold on.
You try. Do it again.
Okay. The Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act Subward Reporting System, or FSRS. And it's fsrs.gov. So you can sign up for an account and you can go through the database of who has been awarded contracts for service. So if you want to look up the companies that are actually working on building the wall still, yeah, you can do that. All of that is supposed to be in here. So what I found interesting, the reason why I brought HR 22 up was because it deals with the budget. In there, it had to have the language about adhering to the existing rules of the House. And in those rules are the Pay-As-You-Go Act. You remember PayGo? This is part of what it's doing. So just a little rewind. Remember when AOC was talking about they won a repeal of PayGo, that was no longer going to be part of the House rules. Well, I went and looked to see if that had been introduced, and I don't see that. It's not there. So PayGo is not a rule like the filibuster. PayGo is actually law. So in order to repeal PayGo, somebody has to issue the legislation. It has to go through the process. It's not there yet. So somebody ask one of the squad members when this is coming, because what they said, and this is where I want to push back and also offer my own personal apology, is they kept saying that PayGo, we won PayGo because PayGo is an obstacle to progressive policy. And I, like maybe many of you, went, oh, okay. And last night I was kicking myself. I was like, why haven't you looked up PayGo? Why haven't you looked? Is what they were saying true? So last night, while I was doing research for this HR 22, I looked it up, and I have to apologize. It took me years to do this. And what I found, I want to share with you, because PayGo is absolute and utter bullshit. and it does not impede progressive policy in any way, shape, or form. It does not impede Medicare for all in any way, shape, or form. And what they are saying about PayGo is an absolute outright lie. What PayGo actually does, we're going to get into, but it is the dual justice system, basically on a legislative level. Some things are subject to PayGo, other things are not. The things that you want, PayGo. The things that the pork barrel projects that Congress wants, not. So these are things that you need to know so that when somebody, and I don't care who it is, if it's your favorite politician says, well, how are we going to pay for it? You need to know the answer, right? And if somebody says, well, we can't do it because of PayGo, you need to know that that's wrong. And we're going to go through a little bit of that today. So, Andy, how do we pay for this shit?
Just like you pay for everything else.
Right.
Well, it's every time, excuse me, every time Congress decides to spend on something,
mm-hmm.
they tell the Federal Reserve, okay, mark up the accounts of this person or this company, this corporation, this whatever, and it's all just spent into existence. The federal government does or does not have any money. They don't have money. They create money every single time they spend. So the whole idea of the PayGo rule is complete and utter nonsense, right? It's when Congress decides to spend on something, they do. That money is spent into the economy, right? It goes into the hands of people, changes hands, and stays circulating in the economy until it eventually is used to pay taxes back to the federal government, and then its finite life ends at that point. And that's the way that Congress pays for everything. Ta-da!
Ta-da! See, that's super, super easy. So yeah, we're going to talk about PayGo in relation to the explanation that Andy just gave. These are really important things that you need to understand, especially in your civic duty and going out and being an advocate for the policies that you care about. So real quick, good morning, Raven. Good morning, Falcon. We have the bird crew today. So Raven, your comment, I'm not sure what you mean by this, but Raven says, keep the Keystone Pipeline going or other countries will suck our money away. Not sure what that means. So if you could follow up in the chat and let me know what that means. And then Mike says, Jayapal is in favor of eliminating the filibuster. I personally agree. Get rid of it. And then Dave says, we can't read it. It's so small. So I will make these graphics available after we're done here. So yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, there was a lot of context in all of these things. So let's go over PayGo real quick. And in the chat, once again, there is a link to the PayGo information on congress.gov. So you can see it for yourself. Learn it, know it, live it. Okay, so this is where PayGo gets kind of wonky with accounting. And it took me a minute to go through it and go, what do they really mean here? So PayGo does not affect everything that we want to pay for. PayGo only affects statutory items. So there is the discretionary spending in annual appropriations like the military budget. PayGo was not a requirement of satisfying the military budget. So just real quick, what PayGo is, you cannot, with these specific items, if you want to buy something in certain situations, you cannot increase the deficit, which is, okay, that's an arbitrary measure. You can't increase the deficit without offsetting. You either have to raise taxes or cut something else, right? And so the way that it was explained initially is this was going to be across the board and we were going to be responsible for our deficit. So for those who haven't read Warren Mosler's book or Stephanie Kelton's The Deficit Myth, Go read those and you'll understand exactly what the deficit measures. And Andy, would I be correct in saying the deficit is a measure of our investment in certain resources and industries, not necessarily debt?
Yeah, you have to think of it in terms of the actual deficit is the yearly difference between what Congress has spent in terms of money into the economy, subtract the amount that has been removed by taxation, right? So it's just a ledger, right? It's just a number that is the difference. So what's subtract the amount of taxes removed from the amount spent in, and that's your deficit. The national debt is a running total of those yearly deficits, right? And the other thing that you have to remember is that when you talk about the federal deficit, that's also, you can talk about, that's a public surplus, right? If you look on the balance sheet, there's two sides to every balance sheet, right? What if you think about in terms of a deficit for the government is a surplus to us, right? That's money spent in, so that's money to us, and that's how the government finances the economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember when President Clinton ended up lowering the deficit to the point where we had a surplus, and that completely screwed small businesses because the federal government was no longer investing in sectors. So that meant small businesses had to do more with their limited capital. It was not a good time if you were a small business owner.
And that whole idea, when you think about it, that government finances the economy, right? The United States government is the sole issuer of the currency, right? It provides the currency to keep the economy going, right? If the government wants to have a surplus instead of a deficit, that means they're going to tax more money out of the economy than they put in. Well, you're starving the economy of money, right? The only other place that people can get money to either pay their taxes or eat or pay their rent or whatever is from the private sector. And the only way the private sector can finance that is by debt, right? By loans, by issuing loans to people. So people are increasing by getting loans and mortgages or credit cards, right? So eventually what happens is there's so little money in the economy to run things that, you know, you go into a recession or a depression, right? And then that's what happens.
Yeah. So in our current economic climate, the stock market, casino aside, we are currently in a depression when it comes to small businesses, which we've discussed here before. Small businesses are 98% of all business and commerce in the United States. So when you are attacking or depressing the largest income economic generator in your country, your GDP is going to suffer. And so if you look at the text of PayGo, it says right here, as a budget enforcement tool, the new statutory PayGo process is aimed at preventing or at least discouraging net deficit increases arising from the enactment of direct spending and revenue legislation. It's a long way of saying, screw you, we're not going to invest in new areas unless we cut in other areas. So would you like pre-K for children so that they get a good head start? Great. Then we're going to cut Meals on Wheels for our seniors and screw those people. That's what this entire policy is about. And it really has no clear economic standing. If you were listening to what Andy was saying, and if you need to rewind it and go back, please do so. But if this is what their goal is, it is contraindicated for a downturn in the economy, which we are in now, right? But they got it anyway. So when we get back to the topic of progressive policies, and this is what I find so interesting, like if you look at our network here, and this is why I have such enthusiasm and pride for the work that we do, because even on our team here in this network, we come from a wide array of political backgrounds. We cover pretty much the entire political spectrum, but we're unified on progressive policy because it is fiscally responsible and socially sound, right? So if you consider yourself a traditional conservative and you're very worried about how we spend and that we're doing it in a responsible way, we got you covered. If you are interested in, maybe pro-life policies where people matter and, that you recognize that we are in this together, we got you covered. So this is where progressive policy is right in the center of the political spectrum. And so they have been saying that PayGo is an impediment to that. So now let's take a look. Is that actually true? And this is where it gets a little confusing. So Andy, this is the last graphic.
What about the second one?
Was that not up, PayGo?
No, you didn't ask for it.
Oh, sorry. Skip it because it's
All
long.
right.
I'll just include these later as we're done.
Right.
It was just a wall of text anyway. So, Dave said he couldn't read it anyway.
Yeah,
so
just something else for people not to read. Yeah.
Right. It's just pretty. Okay. So on this last one, this is from the Congressional Budget Office. And if you're not familiar with what this organization does, they are bipartisan and fiercely bipartisan. So, and you never even heard Trump try to mess with them, talking about fake news or it's Democrat. No, they will cut a bitch. They are so fiercely bipartisan. And it's a bunch of economists who run through the numbers. So when something comes through, they've got to double check it. There's a congressional, I forget the name of it. I haven't had enough coffee, but there's a group that when a piece of legislation comes through, they've got to check it and make sure that it doesn't interfere with other pieces of legislation. So that's one side of it. These folks are just focused on the economics and economic policy. So PayGo is one of these new regulations that they have to kind of keep in mind when a new piece of legislation comes through, but there's only one type of spending that PayGo applies to. And this is something I didn't know, and so now I'm giving it to you. So PayGo does not apply if I am a senator and I want to get money for my district where we happen to manufacture tanks like Iowa. And I want to make sure that I'm getting a couple $1 billion for a couple tanks. I can put through a piece of legislation or add an amendment to an existing bill to secure that funding. And if that bill becomes law, then the federal appropriations process kicks in, like Andy was talking about. They just sign it and credit the proper account with the money. So my district will get the billions of dollars. That is not affected by PayGo in any way, shape, or form. So they can freely create the funds necessary to fund all of these pork projects, all of them. The ones that do get affected by this arbitrary PayGo rule are the ones that we fund every year. And this is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, what they call entitlements, right? So things that you rely on get affected by PayGo right now. Things that they just want don't. So do you see how they've created this dual financing system out of thin air? And that's PayGo. And so if you go back and look at the history of PayGo was another one of those things that came from a far-right neocon think tank and was initially trotted out as kind of a joke, right? And then it was picked up and yeah, let's do it. So from the very beginning, this has been something that has been presented inaccurately to the public and does not equally apply to all spending bills that come through Congress. Everybody got that? So we have just created, just like our dual justice system, we've created a dual financing system for no reason. So
they're for no reason. there's a reason, right? It's to
No good reason.
maintain the neoliberal mindset, right? That we can't afford it, so you can't have it, right?
But,
Of course, you're going to finance the military industrial complex for $760 billion every single year, and nobody's ever going to ask any questions about it, right? Like, the whole thing is really just all you need to do is just look at how things unfold every time there's a change in the structure of government, right? I mean, you go from a Democratic president to a Republican president, right? It's been the same ever since Reagan, ever since, you get the GOP in there. Well, we're going to cut taxes on the rich because trickle down economics, and that'll help everyone. And it doesn't. Well, it never does. And then they say, well, we spent too much money. We're going to have to cut back, right? They just cut the tax revenue from rich people, and they use that as an excuse to say, well, now we have to cut back on our spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that came up with the phrasing of entitlements, which is your Social Security and your Medicaid and your Medicare and all those things that actually help people, right? And it's the same song and dance every time. And people think that Trump doing it was the first time that it's been done, and that makes him a horrible president. And it has nothing to do with that. It's from the exact same playbook since Reagan. It's always been.
Absolutely. So here's where we're going to get into maths. Maths is hard. So let's test this PayGo thing, right? Let's test what they said and see if it actually plays out. So if we have a progressive policy like Green New Deal it's not subject to PayGo at all. So if you write the bill and you fund it, I don't know, for 2-3 years, let's see how it goes, so that we can get jobs to places like West Virginia, where they're been destitute for a very long time. Let's start there. Could you do it? Yes, you could. If that bill passes, then it goes through the standard federal appropriations process. It gets funded, and we start churning it out, right? There's a new jobs program, federal jobs program. We talked about that on Wednesday with Dr. Kaboob. If you didn't see it, go watch it. We could fund that today through the standard process. All right, well, now let's look at Medicare for All, this particular policy, because Medicare for All is a little bit different, right? So we have Medicare and Social Security. Medicare for All could be argued that it does have to adhere to the PayGo. So two things on this one. If Medicare for All needs to adhere to the PayGo plan, and we saw someone like AOC say, oh, no, we've got to repeal PayGo before we even try Medicare for All. Well, first off, you need to go back and read your own colleague's bill. Senator Jayapal, when she wrote this bill, working with Senator Sanders, it went through with a net zero. So it already adhered to PayGo. And what it did was you had the reduction of costs that we have now through our Medicare, Medicaid, and other social services that are very wasteful and costly. So it reduced those, and then it had a tax component for the 1% of the top incomes. So already Medicare for All, as written by Representative Jayapal, was at net zero. So the PayGo excuse did not apply to that at all. So either AOC hadn't read her colleague's bill, or she was lying. I'm not sure which, and I'm not willing to call it out. You figure it out. But if we were going to do Medicare for All and not do the funding model that Representative Jayapal had already done all the work on, and let's say, we don't want to necessarily raise taxes too much on the 1%, maybe just tiny bit, maybe, then here's a way to do it. And this is where maybe you want to get out your calculator and check my numbers, because I went through and looked at them, and you tell me where I'm wrong. So right now, today, we are spending, so, okay, let's back up. The Mercatus study said that Medicare for All would cost $40 trillion over 10 years. So we're going to make the assumption that they're right, because they pretty well were. But let's just use that as a starting point. And it's actually a high number. Other studies that came out said maybe it was going to be 34 trillion, but let's stick with 40. So for 1 year, that's 4 trillion. 4 trillion. That's the cost for 1 year of Medicare for All. That is expanded benefits. We do away with the prescription donut hole that is literally killing our seniors. We do away with bankruptcy from not being able to afford medical bills. And we actually invest in our people during a global pandemic, because that is the morally right thing to do. And oh, by the way, we're going to save some money, and I'll show you how. So now we have our moral compass straight, our fiscal compass straight, and we will not raise the deficit at all. Here's how we do it. Pretty simple. So if we're trying to get to 4 trillion in spending for 1 year and offset that with PayGo, first, let's look at the ACA or Obamacare. We currently today spend $1.7 trillion on ACA. And we now know that ACA made its cost savings by reducing payments on doctors and hospitals. That reduced the number of independent practitioners and created hospital groups, which have raised fees exponentially on us, the consumers. So we're paying the cost twice on that. We're paying it through the ACA program itself, and then us as individual consumers, which is not part of the 1.7 trillion. So let's take that 1.7 trillion and all the subsidies that we're giving to the insurance companies who don't add anything to your care. Zero. They provide no benefit whatsoever between you and your doctor. Zero. So that's 1.7. We've got that. So Medicare and Medicaid itself, that is a separate program from the ACA, and that's another $1.4 trillion a year. So what are we up to now? We're at 1.7,
3.1.
Oh, we're almost there. Holy shit. We're almost
Holy
there.
shit.
We're almost
Good
there.
Lord.
Right. So here's where it gets a little tricky, and this might be a little bit of a hard sell. So part of Medicaid is for veterans under the VA system. And most people don't know that. When they say, you know, let's cut back on the funding for Medicaid because it's just a bunch of poor people, screw those people. You're talking about our veterans too, because the VA funds vouchers under Medicaid for all of our veterans who are either too far from a VA facility, like remote areas, remote being 2 hours away, which is most veterans, or they need specialized care, and it allows them to go see any doctor that they want to, right? So that's all under the Medicaid plan. So if we're going to do away with the existing Medicare and Medicaid program, now we got to start looking at VA and Tricare, which it makes sense. If we're going to improve coverage and reduce costs for 75%, 80% of the population, why wouldn't you do it for the other 20% and allow that veteran to still go see any doctor or specialist that they want? Makes sense. Let's do that. So in Tricare alone, you're anywhere from, now if you're just looking at VA facilities, $589 billion a year, but if you do the entire Tricare program, that's 1.8 trillion per year. So add in the 1.8 trillion. Where are we at, Andy, with our number? What do you have?
We are at what were you at? 3.1, and then you're going to add
1.8.
1.8. So you're at 4.9.
Well, damn it! Now we've spent too much. Right? We've offset too much. So we have 0.8 in there, and we have not raised a dime in taxes to do any of this. Nothing. We haven't even asked for Americans across the country to have that shared responsibility payment that was in Representative Jayapal's bill. There's no tax increase for anybody going through this model that I just went through. Nobody pays a dime more. If we offset the way the PayGo requires, ACA, Medicare, Medicaid, and Tricare. We're done. But let's say you don't want to mess with Tricare. Then the Trump tax cuts, that was like 3 or 4 trillion per year. And now not only have we paid for Medicare for all, but now we've added another 2 trillion that we can use to reduce the deficit just to make somebody happy.
Yes, let's remind people that the reason that we're going through these numbers is not because this is actually the reality of the way that things get paid for. It's just that if the Democrats want to enforce the PayGo rule, this is why it doesn't apply, right? Mm-hmm. Although that's not necessary, right? It's just, horse caca like we've talked about. But even if they say how you're going to pay for it, well, it's still going to cost less money than the system that is currently in place, right? And there's another thing that people don't realize. And when you talk about Medicare for all, you're basically talking about dismantling the insurance, the health insurance system, right? Because it's no longer necessary. You don't need the middleman anymore, right? Because the government is going to be funding this program, right? Directly, paying the doctors and the hospitals, and the people just go in and they get their health care and they don't pay a dime. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, what happens is all of those people that are employed in the health insurance industry, are no longer going to have jobs in those industries, right? Which means that there's going to be a lot of people that are unemployed, which means that with the installation of Medicare for all, we also have to ensure that the people that are going to be displaced from their work because of that need a just transition into another field, another place that they can work, which is why the job guarantee that we talked about on Wednesday is such an important policy that needs to go hand in hand with the Medicare for all system, right? With all of those people that will be out of work because of the health insurance industry going down, there's actually MMT economists that are saying in order to maintain the system so that that the don't get inflation and this kind of thing, that there may actually be a tax cut that comes with Medicare for all, which is very interesting. And that's kind of getting into to the weeds. But when people talk about Medicare for all and how they're going to be paying half of their salary in taxes to pay for it, you may actually get a tax cut because of it.
Oh, absolutely. So here's a fun little fact, and I'm going to throw this out to the audience. How many Americans would be displaced if the insurance industry, the health insurance industry, were to go away today? How many Americans would be displaced in their job? And I want to see what people think about this. I'm not going to give you the answer right now, but Andy, do you have a guess? How many Americans are we talking about would need to be retrained or assisted with another job transition?
More than 50.
Okay, yeah, more than 50. Good guess, but I'm going to let that one hang out there. So everybody who's watching, give me your best estimate. Don't cheat. Don't look it up.
Don't use a Google machine.
No Google. Just what, off the top of your head, how many Americans currently work in the health insurance industry right now today? So there's that one. But getting back to the PayGo question, Andy, this is where I am torn, because now that we've gone through what PayGo actually is, and people have a better understanding, hopefully, of how federal spending actually works, then put that against the backdrop of everything that we've been hearing just in the last few months. Right? Particularly from the left, when they're giving us all of these excuses why things can't be done, Whereas I'm sitting here watching record-breaking death tolls now across the country from a pandemic, and I'm watching businesses close, and I'm watching people lose their life savings, all of these things. I'm really having a hard time being supportive of people who are coming out telling us, how are you going to pay for it? And we can't do these things. And all of the rhetoric that we're currently seeing, the excuses. What am I supposed to do with this is kind of where I'm left, right?
Mhm.
So, all right, we have our first guest from Dave Gutowski. Dave says 10 to 20,000. No, you are off by an order of magnitude, actually. But good guess. Thank you. Thank you for playing. You get nothing.
We have wonderful parting gifts for you.
Right, exactly. So, well, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll leave that open for just a minute more, and then I'll give you the answer. And it goes with Andy's explanation about why this would actually be a non-inflationary event and might actually warrant a tax cut because of it. So it's an interesting commentary on the insurance field. So yeah, but mind you, even with Medicare for all, you excuse me, you're still going to need some form of insurance for like the things that Medicare for all doesn't cover, like elective surgery and cosmetic surgery that is not medically necessary. So you're still going to have these funding vehicles available, just not for, things that you actually need to stay alive. So that's kind of an interesting thing that never really gets part of the conversation. The other thing is, excuse me, I need more coffee. I see that the good work that is being done and continues to be done from like National Nurses United to organize around Medicare for all. You need to take these conversations into those organizing activities, and you need to make sure that the people who are leading them also have the same understanding that what we are actually fighting against is not necessarily convincing people this is necessary, but asking those in a position of power to get out of the way while they're doing this, right? So one part of my calculation that I did not include that is actually part of the cost savings. Right now, we fund full coverage for every member of Congress, every member of your state legislature, every federal employee, teachers, everything on down. So all of that goes into the cost savings because a member of Congress is getting platinum level coverage that you and I can no longer buy on these exchanges through ACA. It's not available to us. The highest level you can get is gold. Platinum is above that. So they're getting all of that through public funding that they themselves are telling us is not good for us. So
yeah.
So there's that pushback. So
Absolutely.
So all right, I'll give you the answer. The number of employees, these are Americans that work nationwide from beginning to end in the insurance industry for health industry. This is Medicare, Medicaid, and public insurance for your employer and all of this sort of thing. Total number is 433,000. The rest of the millions are overseas. So for years, insurance companies have actually been outsourcing and offshoring our jobs. So now we only have, it's a relatively small number, 433,000 that would need to be retrained, but they already have skills based on the jobs that they're doing that would be so super marketable. And through something like the federal jobs guarantee, they're going to get an immediate pay raise because most of the insurance companies are paying a minimum wage, state minimum wage, not necessarily federal. So
right, which is from what I understand, that can vary quite a bit through the country from state to state, right?
Yep, that is true. So there are so many opportunities here, and I'm just, if you learn nothing else in watching this entire hour trying to figure out what we were talking about, PayGo is an absolute lie. It is a lie, and it is not applied equally to all of the programs across the board that Congress wants to get funded. They're holding the purse strings and holding PayGo over our heads, and it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary, and yeah. So that's a big thing. So when you see somebody like AOC or McConnell or Schumer or Pelosi, any of those people, how do you pay for it? And PayGo's an obstacle. You now have the tools to push back and say, no, actually, it's not. And what you're saying is inaccurate. And how are you a member of Congress and you don't know this? Either you don't know it or you're lying. Which is it?
Right. And as from what I understand, and different conversations I've had with people that would know, that have been, economists, either the MMT or post Keynesian, or any of the economists that have had conversations with politicians and, questioned them on this. The vast majority of them know that PayGo is crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they can't dare say anything because their corporate donors don't want them to say anything, right? They're
Exactly
threatened
right.
to be cut off from their funding. And that's the key to neoliberalism, right? And to the oligarchy that runs the United States right now. It's very interesting. And this is a quick point I wanted to make before we go, Carrie. As now the Biden administration takes over, and they talk about the first week or the first 100 days, what executive orders that Biden is going to be signing into law, and what the new Congress or Senate are going to try to push forward. Any talk about Biden being pushed left, or more progressive policies coming in and being introduced on the floor. The question to ask yourself is, in this bill, will the enactment of this bill cost rich people any of their money? Right? We talk about Biden in his first day on the job yesterday, or the day before, whatever it was, signing, executive orders, right? And one of the first ones was, Voting Rights Act or what have you, and the back into the Paris Climate Accord. If you look at what these are actually saying, what these executive orders are saying, these things don't cost anybody that is a Democratic donor any money, any of their business opportunities, right? If you want to use that as a gauge, right, then if you ever see that, that's a very good sign, right? That there is something that is considered a progressive policy that is signed into law that actually takes money away from rich people. That's the sign that I think, is a turning point, is a good thing. My personal prediction is you will not see that.
I'm not taking that bet, even for $1. I think you're absolutely right. And for those who aren't aware of what those executive orders were, the reason we didn't cover it today is because go check out Bo, the fifth column. He did a really nice, it's like 10 minutes, and he runs through them real quick. But yeah, Andy, you're right. None of them cost the donor class, a dime, including this ethics pledge that Republicans are refusing to sign. So yeah, on that note, just real quick, yay, we've had our 100th episode of Hair of the Dog. So I'm thinking next week, maybe we need to do a little giveaway. I'm thinking maybe some of our swag. And for those of you in the colder climates, we do have hoodies. So yeah, look for that next week, Monday. I'm thinking Monday.
Okay, that's fine. But just keep this in mind. Can't give me away because the border's closed.
That's true. We could do a virtual date with Andy. Get wine drunk with Andy.
Good Lord.
that would be great.
I think that would be with the losing person. There's your valuable parting gifts right there.
Exactly. I don't know. I'd buy that for $1. But yeah, so thank you so much everyone for tuning in. And if none of this made sense, drop us a line, write it in the chat, and we'll go over it with you. And in fact, if you want a celebrity economist to help you out, maybe we can do that for you too. But it's pretty, once you get this, once it clicks, it's pretty simple and you will never forget it. So just if you need a little extra help getting there, let us know, because this is so, so important to cut through the rhetoric, because literally we're running out of time. And so we need our members of Congress to step up and start being honest with the American public about what's going on. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And Andy, you want to take us out?
Absolutely. That was a good show. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. Good talk. And everyone, enjoy your weekend. Try to take a little time for yourself and unplug and, wherever you are. And enjoy it. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keeping it G. Whoa.